in action over the burning of the Holy Quran by a far-right politician in Sweden. Among them were leaders from PAS, Bersatu and Muslim NGOs.
The protesters marched from the Ashikirin KLCC mosque to the Swedish embassy after Friday prayers while shouting "Protest Sweden" and "Destroy Sweden." Swedish far-right politician Rasmus Paludan's burning of the Quran last Saturday sparked outrage and protest among Muslims worldwide. However, Swedish authorities have said Paludan's act did not violate its laws. Malaysia has condemned the Quran burning, with Prime Minister Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim calling it a vile act and a hate crime. Malaysia's Foreign Ministry had summoned the Chargé d'Affaires of the Swedish Embassy in Kuala Lumpur over the matter on Thursday. The ministry said the Chargé d'Affaires took note of the Malaysian government's protest and said he would convey the views to Stockholm.
Some protesters also made their way to the Dutch embassy protesting the desecration of a Quran by a Dutch political leader earlier this week. The Foreign Ministry issued a statement today condemning Islamophobic acts that have been repeated within the last few days despite global condemnation.
The ministry also called on the United Nations, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, and the Human Rights Council to urgently address the incidents and find amicable measures to protect religious scriptures worldwide. On Monday, anti-Islam extremist and far-right leader Edwin Wagensveld tore pages from the Quran and stepped all over them at The Hague in Netherlands. Following the incidents in Sweden and Netherlands, Muslim countries worldwide staged protests and demonstrations demanding punishment for the perpetrators.
In other news, Selangor Menteri Besar Datuk Seri Amiruddin Shahri confirms that the State Legislative Assembly will not be dissolved before Hari Raya Aidilfitri celebrations. 6 states, including Selangor, are set to hold state elections by the middle of the year.
The other states are Penang, Negeri Sembilan, Kedah, Kelantan and Terengganu. In December, the Election Commission said the 6 states should consider holding simultaneous state elections, as it would help the EC to better coordinate the deployment of manpower. The EC estimates the state elections will cost 450 million ringgit. Meanwhile, on Saturday, PAS said it will not make a joint decision with Pakatan Harapan as to when it will dissolve the legislative assemblies in the 3 states it leads.
Meanwhile, the Registrar of Societies ROS will meet with UMNO representatives next week regarding a motion passed at the party's General Assembly not to have any contests for the top 2 posts in the upcoming party elections. ROS Director General Nawardi Saad told Berita Harian that it is investigating a complaint lodged by 2 UMNO members alleging that the motion violated the party's constitution. The motion adopted by the General Assembly ensures that Party President Datuk Seri Ahmad Zahid Hamidi and his deputy, Datuk Seri Muhammad Hassan, will be returned unopposed in the UMNO elections, which must be held by May 19th. Nawardi added that he has yet to receive a full report about the General Assembly held from January 11 to 14. Meanwhile, all eyes are on the UMNO Supreme Council meeting this evening amidst mounting speculation that disciplinary action will be taken against party members allegedly linked to acts of sabotage and criticizing the party's leadership. The decision by the government of former Prime Minister Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad to withdraw applications filed in connection with the Batu Puteh sovereignty issue was improper and not in order. Attorney General Idris Harun said this was based on a cabinet decision on January 11th.
The decision was made following a report by the Special Task Force on the sovereignty of Batu Puteh, Batuan Tengah and Tubir Selatan. Idris said the Attorney General's chambers is studying recommendations made by the Special Task Force on the matter, including as to whether there had been any misfeasance in public office. However, he noted the government respected the International Court of Justice's judgment. On May 23, 2008, the ICJ ruled that Batu Puteh belonged to Singapore, while Batuan Tengah was awarded to Malaysia. The then Barisan Nasional government requested an interpretation of the judgment from the ICJ. Following this, the Pakatan Harapan government under Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad decided not to pursue the matter, as advised by former AG Tan Sri Tommy Thomas.
The Land Public Transport Agency, APAD, recommends immediate suspension of development and restricted activities in the Railway Protection Zone. This comes after services on the Ampang LRT line were disrupted following the discovery of a kinked track alignment near the Bandaraya station. The agency said the recommendation was submitted until the actual cause of disruption is known and all aspects and safety requirements are complied with by the project owner. Based on preliminary inspection, APAD said some development near the railway track and the LRT second reserve area was taking place without prior consultation. It did not name the project owner responsible for the incident. The 1,500 ringgit fee for rehiring foreign workers under the recalibration program will remain. Home Minister Datuk Sri Saifuddin Nasution Ismail said there was no reason for the fees to be reduced or abolished and that the program has not caused any major disruptions to the supply chain.
Rekalibrasi ini untuk tahun lepas menyumbang lebih 700 juta revenue pada kerajaan. Pada masa yang sama, majikan dapat memenuhi keperluan mereka. Dan tenaga itu adalah sumber tenaga kerja itu berada dalam negara. Bermaksud mereka tak perlu ambil daripada negara sumber di luar. Itu jauh lebih mudah. So buat masa sekarang keadaannya as it is.
Saifuddin was commenting on calls by certain quarters to abolish the fee. Putrajaya reintroduced the labour recalibration program earlier this month to help fulfill the demand for foreign workers in the country. The program, which ended on December 31st last year, is continuing for another year.
Road traffic injury is the leading cause of child mortality in Malaysia, accounting for 14% of deaths among 5 to 14-year-olds. Tonight on Consider This, we explore strategies to protect children from preventable road traffic injuries and death. Time for a quick break. Stay with us.
Magnum Belgian Chocolate Lux Baharu, Ice Cream Coklat Ungu, Coklat Belgium Tebal, dan Cebisan Biskut Rangup.
Seems to be the ideal.
Magnum, kenikmatan sejati.
Memperkenalkan Nestle Omega Plus Dark Choc diperbuat dengan kebaikan susu dan koko serta 1.2 gram sterol tumbuhan Acticol yang membantu merendahkan kolesterol. Sayangi diri untuk yang tersayang. Nestle Omega Plus Dark Choc.
You are unique. As a bank, it's what drives us to do right by you.
At least 9 Palestinians were killed after Israeli forces fired rockets in the West Bank, in the largest single death toll in years of fighting. This comes after Gaza fired 2 rockets towards southern Israel, but were intercepted by missile defenses. The cross-border fire came after Israeli forces raided the occupied West Bank on Thursday. In the northern city of Jenin, Israeli soldiers killed 7 gunmen and 2 civilians during the raid. Since 2005, the United Nations has never recorded such a high death toll in a single operation in the West Bank. Meanwhile, the Palestinian Health Ministry said 20 people were wounded before the Israeli forces withdrew mid-morning. The overnight rockets triggered sirens in Israeli communities near the Gaza border, warning residents to take shelter, but there were no reports of injuries. Thailand's ruling party named Deputy Prime Minister Prawit Wongsuwan as its candidate to be premier in the upcoming general election. Under the army-backed Palang Pracharat Party, he will likely run against incumbent Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha, who is likely aiming to extend his rule through the recently created United Thai Nation Party.
Meanwhile, the main opposition party, Pheu Thai, is expected to name the daughter of self-exiled former premier Thaksin Shinawatrai as its candidate for the top post. No official polling date has been announced, but it must be held by May. Prayut first came to power as army chief in a 2014 coup, before cementing his role in the controversial 2019 elections, where he and Prawit were close allies during the years under the junta rule. Both leaders were former army chiefs who often referred to each other as brothers and were involved in coups against governments under the Shinawatrai family.
Meanwhile, angry police officers in Haiti stormed the Prime Minister's residence and the country's main airport Thursday to protest the killings of more than a dozen colleagues by criminal gangs. They blamed the government for not taking action against armed gangs who had controlled much of Haiti in recent years.
Local media reported that several police officers had gathered outside Prime Minister Ariel Henry's official residence in Port-au-Prince. They smashed car windows and shot weapons into the courtyard, but did not attack Henry's living quarters. The Caribbean nation has been gripped by gang wars and political chaos following the assassination of President Jovenel Moïse in 2021. The United Nations estimates that 60% of Port-au-Prince is controlled by the gangs. The National Union of Haitian Police Officers says 14 men have been killed since the start of the year in various gang attacks targeting police stations. Just last Wednesday, 2 officers were murdered inside a police station and another 4 killed execution style on the street outside.
Hong Kong's customs authorities announced the country's ban on CBD to take effect on February 1st. The ban categorizes CBD as a dangerous drug and mandates penalties for its production, smuggling and possession.
Penalties include up to life imprisonment and 5 million Hong Kong dollars in fines for importing, exporting or producing CBD, while possession of the substance can result in a sentence of up to 7 years and 1 million Hong Kong dollars in fines. CBD, derived from the cannabis plant, was previously legal in Hong Kong, where bars and shops sold products containing it. But authorities decided to prohibit the substance last year, with residents given 3 months from October 27th to dispose their CBD products in special boxes set up around the city. The move was in line with the zero-tolerance policy towards drugs in Hong Kong, as well as on mainland China, where CBD was banned in 2022.
Nearly 200 nations have pledged to contain global warming to between 1.5 and 2 degrees Celsius. Malaysia had set similar targets with the ambition to achieve net zero carbon emission by 2050. Is Malaysia on track to net zero?
There's 2 different types of target that we're talking here. One is the net zero emission as early as 2050. Another one that's more official, because the government actually submitted in black and white to the United Nations, and that target is actually by 2030 and 45% carbon intensity reduction. And when we say carbon intensity, it is carbon emission against some sort of indicator. Normally countries will use like either carbon emission per GDP or carbon emission per capita, which is population, and the one that Malaysia submitted is per GDP. So in that sense, although the so-called absolute emission is upwards, but if we divide it by GDP, I don't have the figure, but it might be actually going down. And if we're going down, then we are pretty on track with the 2030 target.
As for developing nations that are focused on economic development, how should they prioritize climate transition?
A lot of developing countries, such as Malaysia, Indonesia, and other developing countries, we are also taking quite some time to be up to par with, for example, the more developed countries, simply because we're also prioritizing our economic development as well. So for Malaysia to, sort of have that transition from being very dependent on coal and fossil fuel, it's going to definitely take a lot more time for us to sort of make that sustainable transition as we move towards a cleaner and healthy future for us all. So I can imagine that it would, take time, but then, eventually we will get there if, we stick to the trajectory as we're supposed to.
Let's just take a step back. Catch the full conversation on It's About Youth on Friday at 10:30 p.m.